design basics. Why? Because as you guys know, some of you are probably just starting, some of you are already down the line with booking a lot of clients. But I feel like as freelancers, maybe some of us went to university for this, some of us didn't, but it's really good to go back to the basics and really understand what are the principles of design, so we can create a really strong foundation for everything that we create for our clients. So the first part of the series, which is today, starts with layout, composition, and hierarchy. So I'm going to share my screen so you guys can follow along. And I'm going to be sharing this screen, and then I'm going to also be sharing Figma. So when I go to Figma, just let me know if you guys can't see my screen, okay? Because I don't know if I shared a window or my entire screen. So let me just go over why this is so important apart from what I just said. User experience. The principles of web design play such a crucial role in enhancing the overall user experience of a website. We have to create visually pleasing and intuitive design, because that is going to be more likely for the user to engage with our websites. Then visual appeal. We can create very basic websites, but obviously that's really not going to attract and captivate users. And by applying things like balance, contrast, alignment, repetition, the designs can really create a strong impact on our users and reduce bounce rate, which is basically what we all want. Usability and navigation are also so effective, need to be so effective, and are so important in our design. So all these things are just the basic sort of stepping blocks to create a really effective design. Branding and consistency. When we get a new client, what is the process that we have to go through to make sure that we are injecting all of those components, elements, colors, typography, graphics, photography that are unique to the brand? And then we go into readability and accessibility. This has a lot to do with contrast, with positioning, with colors, with typography. So all of those things we will cover as well. And lastly, communication of information. Obviously, we have to make sure that our designs are actually communicating. We obviously love all the award-winning websites, but most of the time, or a lot of the time, they're missing the point. So we want to make sure that all of these basics will help us to create something that is stunning, that's beautiful, that maybe will win awards, but that it's effective. So let's start. Layout. What is layout? Now, we're going to go a little technical here, but just don't fall asleep, follow along. Obviously, I'm going to give you guys a copy of this so you can go over. And I just realized that there's a bigger padding here at the top, and it's driving me crazy. So I'll fix that later. So layout in web design refers to the arrangement and organization of visual elements on a web page. It involves determining the placement of size, spacing, and overall structure of various components, such as your texts, your images, your graphics, nav bars, buttons, and interactive elements. Now, layouts has principles inside of them. And the 4 principles of layout are proximity, alignment, repetition, and contrast. And they all play such an important role in the most basic part of building the design for our websites. So let's break it down. Proximity refers to the grouping related of elements together, allowing users to easily understand the relationship between each other. So obviously, you know Thai. I wanted to share this website because I think that Thai really does this really well. he is able to take the full picture, but somehow connect all of the elements in a very clean way. You understand where's the logo, where's the CTA, super clear, nothing is taking away from it. You know where the menu is, and you know that that main headline is talking about this bold founders that this capital or investment firms is working with. And the images are just they're in proximity enough to know that that's what we're talking about. Now, let's go into an example. In these examples, I'm going to walk you through the proximity principle and how grids and the rule of thirds can help you guys set up a solid foundation for your designs. So can you guys see Figma? No, right?
No, we can't see it.
Nope.
Okay. Okay, you can see it now, right?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So when we talk about proximity, obviously we're gonna take all of the examples from the Flow Party website just because it's something that we already have, and it has actually a lot of use cases that we can use here. So when we think about proximity, what are the things that we have on a hero? The logo, the headline, sub-headline, images, videos, or graphics, and the navigation bar. If we have something that it's very simple, we know where everything has to be positioned. Now, let's say that we just want to create something out of the ordinary, award-winning, and we start going really crazy with where the things are positioned. Now, when we don't really think about where the position of elements are in how do you say that word? Sorry, I'm thinking in Spanish right now. Without intention, everything can just not make sense, and it could be really confusing for the user. So the first thing that we have to think about is the 12 column grid. So the 12 column grid separates the space on your website into equal sections. And these sections can be divided vertically, horizontally, or both. I always use it. Obviously, there's many options for you guys to use grids, but it really helps me understand the spaces where I want to place information. Because I feel like when you're designing, when you start with a blank canvas, it's so overwhelming. There's so many things that you can do, but there's like really nothing you can do. So it really becomes confusing as to where to start. So starting with a 12 column grid or the rule of thirds is a great start because you can compartmentalize the spaces where you will add your information or the elements that you want to add. So you know that on the top right, on the top left, you have your logo. In the middle, maybe you have your navigation bar. On the top right, you have your menu. In your middle, you have your headline and your sub headline. And then on the bottom spaces, you can add information that maybe it's not so important. And then maybe in the middle, obviously your CTA, or on the top hand right corner. Now, if we see the final version of the Flow Party site, you can see that everything falls exactly into the rule of third. Now, when Joseph designed this website, he didn't even have this grid in place. But somehow when I did the exercise for this presentation, everything perfectly fell into the rule of thirds. So try using this concept or this principle to create new designs, and you'll see how it'll be easier to position graphics, images, text, and any sort of element that maybe you are not sure where to place. Okay, now alignment. E-commerce is a great example for alignment because there's so many components, so much text and so much information that really needs to be properly aligned so everything looks nice and clean. Alignment ensures harmonious arrangement of all of your elements, and it provides a visual clarity and balance. Now let's go into the example for alignment. So the first principle within alignment that we have is grid. The grid involves alignment of the elements in the grid system, which we all know. Why this is really good is that it provides a lot of uniformity and consistency across the design. And it gives you sort of like the tools to move around a smaller space and not have so like a whole viewport width and height. Sorry, can somebody move? Who is it? So it compresses your space and gives you more constraints in all of the elements that you have to work with within that grid. So if you see here, let me see. If you see here, I drew lines so you guys can see all of the alignment that's happening within this grid system. If you see, I am so anal about everything being exactly in the same alignment. And I use a lot these rules or rulers because it really allows me to keep everything super, super precise and everything in a box. So a grid within a grid. So this is a great example of how I would do something like that. Now we have obviously center alignment, which everybody understands and knows what it is. We have flush left alignment, which is great for lists or big amounts of text. And then we have the flush left alignment, which is this alignment here. And this is usually used to give a little bit more interest to the page. Okay. Now we're going into repetition. So repetition involves using consistent styles, which are colors, patterns throughout your design to establish a coherent visual language. So let's go into our examples of the Flow Party website, and we can see the repetition that we used here. Now, if you go into the Flow Party site, and if anybody has never seen it, maybe someone can share it on the chat. But throughout the site, all of the elements that Diego created initially, that were all of the flow avatars, the colors that he used, we replicated them and expanded them throughout the site, that no matter where on the site you are, you will always recognize that it's the Flow Party. Why? Because you see that all of the hero, for example, all of the heroes, let me remove the grid here. All of the heroes follow the same consistency. They all have the same graphic in the middle. They all have the same positioning on the graphics on the ends. They all have followed the same typography, maybe in a smaller size, but the same one, and the same combination of serif and sans serif. Now, consistency could become a little bit boring, but sometimes it's better to have consistency than to go too crazy and the website look completely different on the homepage, and then on the about, you don't even know where you are. Then we go into branding. You want to make sure that you use all of the brand assets that your client provides. That is a given, obviously. But sometimes, let's say that the client doesn't really have brand material or has never done a brand design. Well, this is where you're going to expand on who their brand is at the moment. Maybe they don't have a web presence. So your job is to expand that personality they have offline into the online world by taking the colors that they use, maybe creating illustrations from what they already have in print or I don't know, in their advertising and other formats. But the idea is to always incorporate that into your design. And then finally, user experience. You want to make sure that you are creating repetition and creating predictable user experiences so the user know exactly where to click. Now, if you go into on the Flow Party side, again, you see that the menu is unusual. It's like a lip here that comes from the bottom. We can see it here. Now, obviously, this is not the typical way a menu looks, but the way it is laid out, and obviously the global 3 lines component of the navigation makes the user understand that that's a lib that will be the menu, and it'll drag down. So always make sure that all of the components and the elements that you're using are familiar enough to the, let's say, to your mom, to know that she can actually click on there and it'll open for it to be the menu. Okay, let me see. Okay, we went there. And then contrast. So contrast, this is where we tap a little bit into accessibility as well. It involves using variation in size, color, or typography to emphasize important elements and create visual hierarchy. Let's go into the examples. Now, if you see, this section of the flow party could be a little chaotic for someone that maybe doesn't really understand the rule of thirds, the grid system. But once you add all of your rules inside of your Canva, you will notice that everything is perfectly aligned and following the rule of thirds. And in this example, specifically talking about contrast, you can see all of the different elements that we created to guide the user's eye to the different places of this section. So we start with obviously an H2 heading, which is smaller than all. And then we create this big pop to know that the user, to let the user know that they have to follow this path to then land into this supporting piece of content. And then we follow into the big description of who the flow party is. So if you can see, we've created this sort of like Z path, which is actually one of the most common layouts in web design. Now, depth and dimension. I skipped a... Oh no, actually, yeah, we're good. So in depth and dimension, you can see that this is a great example of this, because you can create a regular footer, just how, you know, we all do footers all the time, but we really wanted to add some depth to the website. And something that Joseph created that was really interesting was this footer with this element that you had just seen here. So by incorporating some types of graphics that are not typical, it creates a lot of interest, and it really just finishes off the page with a lot of, yeah, just dimension and fun, and it's just so striking to the eye. Okay, so now we're going to go into composition, but is there, like, are we doing good? Is this boring? Are you guys following?
Yes, and I think that Corey made an interesting question. I don't know if we're on that part of the presentation yet that we can ask this type of question, but like, he has a client that has like 5 different color combinations for his brand, and Corey tried to use like 2 main colors, but the client wants like all the colors everywhere. So how do we handle that? What do you think, Melissa?
Okay, so I actually had a client not long ago that also came with the same sort of problem. And what I do in that situation is that you kind of have to think, what are going to be your main colors and what are going to be your secondary colors? And you have to separate those 2 groups. And even tertiary, I don't know if that's how you say it, but terciario. You have to divide them into groups and decide which ones are the colors that are going to be your primary colors throughout the site, and which ones are going to be the supporting ones. Now, when you're doing a website, obviously it really depends on the style, the look and feel of the site, and the branding of the brand design that the company has. That doesn't really mean that you have to plaster every single color into the background of a section. So what you do is that, let's say that you have two muted colors. Let's say that in the best case scenario, they're white and black. You start the base of your website with those two colors and use the secondary colors only for accents, and spread them out like very, how do you say, like sporadically. So I can actually, I don't think I can show it yet, but for example, let's say you have a hero where the background is white. You can start incorporating the second primary color, which is black, into the heading. Then let's say that your third color, or the group that is the secondary color, let's say that it's red. So you can create an underline under the main message of your headline with that red color. And then you can introduce a secondary color as well, let's say that it's yellow, into the buttons. So that way you are still already using 4 of your colors, but you're not like just plastering the background of a whole section with a red or a yellow. So I don't know if that maybe answered your question. Cool. Are there any other questions? Okay. I'll continue and then I'll just read the chat. Okay, so now we're going into composition. So the difference with layout and composition is the arrangement and positioning and organization of all of your design elements. Now, it involves strategic placement of content, images, navigation menus, buttons, and other visual elements so you can create a really visually appealing website. Now, in this section of the presentation, I don't have examples because I feel like it kind of falls into the same examples that we had on the previous section. So we can maybe discuss this at the end of like maybe examples that you guys have seen, or any questions that you have regarding composition. Okay, so the first one is balance. Again, I wanted to show an example of something that is very visually balanced, and sort of like our OCD is just like satisfied, because these are the type of designs that have a perfect balance. We don't have anything off-centered, and it's just very visually appealing, symmetrical, and easy for the eye. Now, in some cases, symmetry can also mean asymmetry. The fact that maybe, let's say, these two images are not perpendicular in the same line, but they're off center, but there's still 2 of them. So that could still be considered balanced. Now, focal point. Focal point is something in the website that visually grabs your attention. It helps your user guide the eye and redirect the focus to that specific element. This website is a great example of that. They don't really have much on their website except this little sort of slider. I don't know exactly what component it is, but it's a slider. And every time you hover over it, the word just like grows and changes color. And this is a great way to create a website that it's super simple, but guides the user straight to what you want, which is your work, and for them to click on it. Now, grids and elements. Oh, I'm sorry that this is pixelated. Grids or elements are great frameworks that help you get structure to organize your content. Every time, and this is the same thing that goes for the rule of third and the 12 grid system, every time you don't know where to position something, whip out your grid. And once you see the grid in your face, you know, okay, if I didn't know where to put that circle, that maybe it's just like a decorative element, I'm going to position it here because I want the eye of the user to start there. And white space. We all love white space, or the people here that love minimal style, and also referred as negative space. It's empty or blank areas in your design. We know some clients hate white space, but if they're trying to go for something minimal, it's always important to respect that space because it is part of the design. And then finally, visual flow. Creating a logical and intuitive visual flow within the design helps you guide your users through the content seamlessly. This example, I actually should have put the website link, but it's great how it really guides the eye with a visual element. So it's not using the typical straight line of a section, but it's using some sort of design that it's not only visually appealing, but it also is part of the brand. And that is all. So I want to grab the last part of the presentation to just like go over the principles, any questions you guys may have. If you guys want to practice with me live and we can do some like live feedback rounds, I would love that as well. Okay, unmute yourselves. What the hell?
Yeah, a lot of the recommendations I get for how to practice is like go to Dribble or try to recreate other designs. What any other recommendations you'd give on how to get better at design?
So I would say, so I don't know, but I feel Dribble, it's not my main source.
Dribble is dead.
That's right. Everybody hates Dribble. Sorry, Pinterest.
Yeah.
Pinterest is where to go now.
Pinterest. So I'm always on Pinterest. I'm always trying to find, let me actually open it and I'll show you how I look for it. Like what are the things that I look for? Because when I'm looking for inspiration, I'm not looking for the entirety of the page that I saved. I'm looking for specific things. So if we go to my board here, for example, like let's say this example, like I don't like the typography, but I do like that sort of asymmetric slider. So I will use that and recreate it. And then once I have the exact recreation of the slider, I will start changing the typography. Then maybe changing the color of the typography as well. Then obviously changing the images, adding different buttons, adding different typography for the heading. And then that way I start creating something that, you know, obviously I take from inspiration from someone, but I rework it to my style. So I'm not only practicing something that I've never done before, but I'm also injecting my style to it and creating my own style with it. And I do that with a lot of things. Like I also have a branding one. I feel like branding is really important when you're a designer. Like when you're creating brands, you're creating everything from scratch. In websites, you have to think about the responsiveness of things, so it's a little bit limiting. But when you're just free designing, like free doing whatever you want in whatever size you want, it's easier to explore. Something else that maybe it's unrelated to your question, but I don't like following like all of this auto layout thing when I'm designing at the beginning, because it really restricts me. Now, if I want to hand off the design afterwards and it needs, like, let's say somebody else is developing it and it needs to be super tidy, then obviously at that point I will do it. But it slows me down so much. So I would say just like be free when you're designing, experiment different things.
Yeah, and it's also important, like, to like if you're going to practice, try to practice a little bit every day. Like every day, try to design something. You don't have to design like a full website. You can just like design one section, like design a hero section, or design like a, I don't know, a portfolio work section, something like that. But try to design something every day.
Yeah.
Because like people say, when people talk about creativity, like being creative, like and being good at design, all of that, it's like a muscle. Like the more you exercise, the better you get, and the easier things get. So like, do what Melissa said. Like, find for good inspiration. Like, stay away from dribble. Right? Find good inspiration, and like you can start trying to replicate some designs. I think that replicating some design, it's good for you to like to try to like training your eye to visualize and identify all the design principles, those design principles that Melissa taught today.
Guys, it's so important. Like, I feel me as a designer, I have evolved from a year ago to today because of these principles. Because I decided that I needed to double down on my practice of these principles, from layout to composition to the little nitty gritty stuff. Like, I am super, super picky. Like, every margin has to be the same. All the alignments have to be the same. If I'm going to align, just align to the left, but then in the next section and I'm aligning to the center, does that make sense with the flow of the website? What is the next section going to be? Is it also going to be left aligned? It has to be, because then it creates that nice flow. So all of those things are so important, but people overlook them because it's just so boring. You just want to go and create something beautiful.
Exactly. Before you break the rules, you need to understand the rules. So you start simple, and when you nail the basics, then that's when you start trying to break the rules and try to create something unique and etc. But you need to nail the basics first. Otherwise, like, your design will feel off. And the basics is what gives you like the foundation to make it look cohesive, consistent. So yeah, that's why basics are important.
Yeah. The other thing you can do, Keegan, is look at those examples that you see, like go to Pinterest, or even if you went to Dribbble, you'll still see, some examples of the kinds of things that that Melissa was talking about. And so go through and see, why is this particular layout effective? How have they used alignment and proximity and all of those things to build the whole, something that is pleasing and works?
Speaking of that, of like the effectiveness of different layouts, so I work on something called Glance, and I basically monitor the websites of tech companies and see the A/B tests that they're running. And I've been noticing that a lot of companies are running A/B tests on their hero sections for different layouts. And I can show you like some examples real fast in the chat.
Super interesting. Oh, wow. I mean, yeah, it makes sense. That I feel like there's, for example, like right away, I'm drawn to some of them, and I don't want to click on other ones. So I am sure that they do this to see what the click rate, where the click rate will go up.
Yeah, I think so. And I think what's interesting here is that in terms of which version ends up winning, it seems like there's a bias towards people preferring like this left aligned layout versus the center aligned. And I don't know if anyone here has like tested that before on their own websites or like had any experience thinking about that. But I don't know if like one layout might be systematically better for conversion, at least in the context of like tech startups who are trying to, get people to sign up for their products.
Yeah, I feel like tech startups are typically left aligned and not center aligned, unless when they're, or I actually haven't seen that in a long time, where they're center aligned and then you have the dashboard in the middle, sort of like coming up, like that one in the bottom right. But I do think tech startups start always left aligned.
I think that one on the Asana example, both Asana and Miro example, what makes difference here is that with the two options that won, both for Asana and Miro, is that you see the full picture of like whatever UI element or the UI of the product itself. When with the options that you have, the text, the headlines, and call to actions left aligned. So for Asana, for example, the version with which is left aligned, you see the whole thing on the top, and the version that has headline center, you still see some of it, but it's like cut out, so you're not seeing the whole thing like at a glance when you arrive on a page. So I think that affects it as well. So everything everything has a different context. So it doesn't mean like okay, most of designers use the left align. Well, it's a well-known pattern, like it works, but it doesn't mean that this will always win. Like there might be other opportunities where a center line design will work better, even for a conversion, not just for visuals. But everything has a different context, and I think that on these two use cases, that's the case. Like you can see the whole thing with the options that are left aligned.
Coming back to the idea of composition, which is also to this, I feel if you're gonna grab information, for me it's just better to go like to really the basics. So I would go to art, classic art. It would be the best because you would really understand composition. For example, just by looking by those examples, everything feels like you're squishing them in, because everything feels like a square, but the same size. So you're actually not being able to really balance that out. Like, where do I look? But rather, I don't know, if you go into like something as easy as Malebich, I'm probably pronouncing it super horribly, which is the two squares that one is black and the other one is red. You can see like even the balance by just having two single squares. Or el juramento de Horacio, which I don't know how to translate that in English. Horacio's kind of it's the way it's in the moment when this guy, it's sort of they're giving him the sword, so he's this kind of colonel or whatever, and he's grabbing and you can see the whole attention. I'm gonna look for it and I'm gonna share it. Give me a second, so you'll see about how do I feel about balance when I look at art and how to translate that.
I think that would be great, because I feel like Gabriel is one of the people in this group that I've seen a lot of his work that understands composition and layout very, very well. I feel like it's very hard to nail that sort of brutalist design, and the way to do it is following these principles really well, and he does that.
For example, if you want to study this, not design necessarily, but art in general, to understand composition, like really here you have everything. Oh, how can I write or do something in here? But okay, whatever. You can see what I mean. For example, all this, it would be like this square is not going to be the same size as this, but it makes sense because, for example, you can see this person is sort of like leaning down because the whole composition is basically moving your eyes to the swords. So it's basically moving like the whole compositions. How do you transform the whole, let's say the whole left side that is moving you from to the right side so hard? You compose it by like this small rectangle. This one's just gonna be like more to the vertical side, but this one is just saying hold the composition. Like I want you to hold the composition here. I don't want you to break, because let's say the ladies and everybody here is not there. What is going to happen? This guy is going to fall, right? Like the whole composition falls, and like your eyes immediately moves here to the red and to the swords. Like everything is basically in this point.
Yeah,
so
there's like a whole story happening here.
What was that?
There's like a whole story happening here too. Like you're saying, with the people behind the person holding the sword, it kind of like adds to almost.
Oh
like,
my God,
yeah.
you can see that in Judith, for example. Like if you see Judith, like how she killed, like, okay, we can see Judith in everywhere because I think that's the art that has been represented so many times across multiple times. Like the girl that cuts the guy's head off. You probably have seen that art. You would understand also by looking at the art how it's like the composition is. And you would understand like not every element has to get the same size, which I'm not saying it to destroy it, but I'm saying it like as a criticism to kind of how I perceive it. Like I feel in those examples, the squares are almost all of them the same, which is what you see every time right now in the web. Like everything is one square. Then when you go to the other one, it's gonna be, yeah, let's have the whole square now and then break it into 3, then 1. But it's great to do that because it's actually moving, like understanding the system of composition and grids. But since most people don't understand it, neither do I, by the way, they don't understand it that well. You just see squares all the time, but they're not having a flow. Like the whole composition feels like if you're just putting windows all the time, like square, you know?
Yeah, it
That's
would
mine.
be so cool if we could invite like an art professor that does like classical paintings to explain this in a more granular level, because it's the same exact thing. It's just squares that you have to fill up, and it's just like top left, top right, center, bottom left, bottom right.
Yeah, Lisinski as well is a very good example because Lisinski got so many objects in one scene that it's even harder to deconstruct the whole composition. But when you try to, you kind of understand where the balance is coming from. In Lisinski's art or Van Gogh, for example, like you kind of understand.
Pierre is also talking about photography, and actually the rule of thirds is from photography, and it applies to web design as well. I wanted to share so one of the practice sort of websites that I designed that I actually haven't developed, because now that I see it, I think I designed it like many months ago, probably a year ago or more. And I loved it so much. And now I see it, I'm like, there's so many composition and layout problems here. But just to give you an idea of like how to practice, here's the link. And basically, if you open it, you can see that I started with my love for fashion. So that's one of the things that I always suggest. Start with something you love: video games, architecture, clothes, sneakers, whatever it is. Then create a little brand. It doesn't have to be something big, but just so you can start creating your colors or picking your colors, picking your fonts, and then start expanding. What are layouts that you love? Like I love sort of like big parallax. I imagined things moving and as you scroll down. So I wanted to practice with that. I wanted to practice designing sliders. So if you see here, this slider here is that slider that I showed you on Pinterest that I wanted to practice. But I added a little bit of my style. So start like that, like create something that you love from a topic that you love, and just keep practicing until you get to a point that you're like, okay, now I see where the things are wrong. There's margins that are off. There's, alignments that are off. Why are some things to the left? Why are the heroes different? Why are, you start questioning yourself. Anybody has other questions? Did you guys like the presentation? I feel like after I presented it, it was kind of like, oh, it wasn't that great. But when I was doing it, I loved it. I was actually learning a lot as I was getting it ready.
It was very cool, Melissa. Amazing.
Yay.
I love when you teach. I already told you that.
Yes.
Maria.
Hi, Diego.
Hey, it's been a
Diego,
while.
yeah, I've been. Even today I got in late because I had a meeting at
Oh,
5:30.
God.
Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording so we can hang out. Yeah, so bye YouTube.